Welcome back to the video here on the Unknown Coder YouTube channel. I am Ethan as always. I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm sorry if I sound a little bit different, a little bit off, but the show must go on. I'm introducing a new series here on my channel where we're going to go through and we're going to try to solve as many of these LeetCode problems as possible. LeetCode is a great tool if you're just trying to learn how to do some programming, trying to practice some programming, or maybe you have a coding interview coming up and you just want to sharpen up on some of your skills. The only issue with LeetCode is that there's so many different options and so many different problems. It's like, where do you start, right? So that's kind of also what this video is about. I'm going to show you all where you should probably start at. And I'm also going to go through each one of these problems from where I'm telling you to start, go through them. Once we get through all those problems, we'll start doing some of the interview problems and things of that sort. So LeetCode actually has this little known secret. It's not really a secret. It's up here. If you go under Explore, there's actually options for you to explore. So there's Arrays 101 and there's all this stuff right here. Now the cool thing about this is you can actually go into the LeetCode beginner's guide and hit play and then go into where to start. And if you go into the Explore card track, it's going to show you a flowchart of kind of where to go and what to do. So according to this, we should start out in array fun and then go into array and strings, go into linked list, go into hash tables, maybe go into recursion, so on and so forth. So what we're going to be doing throughout this series is I'm going to go through all of the different coding challenges inside these and do them one by one. It's not going to be in any like specific order on the actual problems page, but for example, if we go into arrays 101 real quick, and if we scroll down into the introduction, the first coding challenge is max consecutive ones. So that's where we're going to start at today. If you are very new to coding or you just want to get some nice refreshers in and stuff, I would actually recommend you going through all of these little sections and things as well, just to kind of get a good grasp. But I'm doing this as a way to know, okay, where should we start with our coding challenges? Where does LeetCode suggest we should start the coding challenges? That way, whenever you guys are going through, you're trying to practice and trying to learn, it's all good that way. Let's go ahead and hop into max consecutive ones. I'm actually going to go back into the problems page and I'll meet you guys over there. For this series, I'm actually going to be using a web application called Miro. That way I can go ahead and annotate some things as well as draw out our logic and write down some logic as well. As I said, we're going to be doing max consecutive ones. And this is a very, very simple problem. All we're going to do is we're going to take some array called numbers and we're going to go through and we're going to count out how many ones we can find in a row, or basically find the maximum number of consecutive ones inside that array. Now, if we take a look at the first example of this problem, what we're going to have is we're going to have an input of nums, and this is the array, and this is going to hold some numbers, and this is going to hold the number 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, and int. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to go through and we're just going to be like, okay, well, this is a 1, this is a 1, there's 2 consecutive ones, this is a 1, this is a 1, this is a 1, there's 3 consecutive ones. Well, 3 is greater than 2, so we want to go ahead and return 3, right? And then in example number 2, what we're going to have in example number 2 is, again, we're going to have our array nums, and this time nums is going to have a 1, a 0, a 1, a 1, a 0, and a 1. So this time around, it's going to be like, okay, well, we have a 1 here, that's one of them. We have a 1 here and a 1 here, that's 2. And then we have one more 1 here, which is 1. So here, the largest number is going to be 2. So we want to go ahead and return 2. So that's the basic examples and what we're going to be looking for. And let's go ahead and take a look at our constraints. So the first constraint is 1 is less than or equal to nums.length is less than or equal to 10 to the 5. All this is saying is that the length of the array, so length of nums, is going to equal 1 to 10,000. So this is a relatively small number for a problem like this, meaning that we don't really have to be too concerned about having to use a double for loop or anything like that. Not that you're going to need to, but if you had to find a brute force way, it's not going to run out of time. And the other one is nums I is either 0 or 1. All this is saying is you don't have to worry about them slipping in some number other than 0, other than 1. So that's going to make our lives a little bit easier as well. So now that we know the basics of our problem here, we want to take this number array, we want to go through it, and then we want to go ahead and figure out how many ones we can find in a row. Let's go ahead and figure out some pseudocode for this problem. So like we said, we're going to start out with some array nums. And with this array nums, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go ahead and say for each element, in nums, we want to do something for each element. We want to go ahead and check to see if that number is 1. So we're going to say if the current number is 1, then we want to count up some number. So we're going to say counter plus plus maybe. Right? Otherwise, if the number is not 1, we want to go ahead and check if counter is greater than previous counter. And in this case, if counter is more than previous counter, we want to go ahead and set the max to this current counter. So if yes, set max to counter, else set counter to 0. And then whenever we get to the end of the loop, we just want to go ahead and then say at end of loop, return max. So I'm sorry that my handwriting is a little bit messy. So what we're going to do is for each element inside of nums, we're going to go ahead and check if the current number is equal to 1. If it is, we'll count plus plus. Otherwise, we'll check the counter greater than previous counter. If it's yes, we'll go ahead and set the max for that counter. Otherwise, we'll set counter to 0. Then once we're at the end of our loop, we'll go ahead and return the max value. There's probably some small things that we need to check for at the end, but we can go ahead and deal with that. Let's go ahead and see what our pseudocode will end up looking like as we run it. So we'll have our example of 1 and 1 and 0, and then 1, 1, 1. And then whenever we have I equal to 0, our current value is going to equal to 1. So we want to go ahead and add to count. So now count is going to equal 1. When I is equal to 1, current will equal to 1. So we want to add to count. So now this is 0, this is 1. And then when I is equal to 2, current is going to equal to 0. So now I want to go ahead and check count greater than max. In this case, count is greater than max. So now max is going to equal to 2 and count is going to go back to equaling 0. And then I equal 3. Now current is going to be equal to 1 again. And then now we're going to go ahead and add to count. So now count started at 0. I is equal to 4. Current is equal to 1 again. So we want to add to count. So now count is equal to 1. It'll be 2 technically. I equal to 5. And then current is once again equal to 1. Add to count. We were at 2. This is the end of our loop, so we have to do one more thing. Let's go ahead and once again check if count is greater than max. In this case, it is. So now we'll go ahead and say max is equal to 3. Then we'll go ahead and return max. Right? So this is the basic logic. So let's go ahead and hop back into LeetCode and take a look at how this will actually turn into code. All right, so now what we're going to want to do is first we need a variable to keep track of the max. So we're going to say int max ones is equal to 0. Then we also need a variable for the current count. So current count is equal to 0. And then we need to go ahead and go through each of our nums. So we can say 4 and then int I is equal to 0. And we can go ahead and say I is less than nums.length. And we can say I plus plus. So for each of our elements inside of nums, we're going to go ahead and check if nums I is equal to 1. So this is the part of the pseudocode saying if the current value is equal to 1, we want to go ahead and say current count plus plus. Otherwise, if not, we want to go ahead and check to see if current count is greater than max ones. In the first case, it will be. Second case, it won't be. We'll say max ones is equal to current count if this is the case. And then after all of this, we'll go ahead in the bottom of the else, go ahead and say current count is equal to 0. So this is the basic logic. The last thing is that it's possible that the largest number of ones is at the end of the array. So we need to go ahead and say if current count is greater than max at the end. And if this is the case, we can go ahead and say max ones is equal to current count. And then we can go ahead and return the max ones. Like so. And then we go ahead and submit this. We see that we get a beats 100%, runtime 1 millisecond, and it's decently good. But there's also other ways to do this that are slightly better. So let's go ahead and hop back into our whiteboard and let's figure out one more way to do this. So as we mentioned, the code that worked before will actually work just fine. However, there's actually another way that's a little bit cleaner and a little bit nicer to do it. And it could actually speed up our runtime slightly if we add more and more data points, because branching is seen as being a little bit slow. So what we could do is we can actually go ahead and get rid of basically all of the branches outside of one. And since we're getting rid of all the branches outside of one if statement, we can actually go ahead and be a lot faster. So let's go ahead and think of it a different way. What if we go ahead and once again loop all the way through until we reach the end of the endpoint? So we're going to say while we have not reached the end of nums. So while we have not reached the end of nums, if current is equal to 1, loop until it's not 1. All right. And then each time we loop, we want to count plus plus. So go ahead and add up 1. And then once we're done looping through the ones, we'll go ahead and check if the number of ones we counted is greater than the old one. And if that's the case, we'll go ahead and set the max ones again. And then at the end of the entire loop, we'll go ahead and just return that max ones. So again, I'm sorry for my bad handwriting. Let's walk through our simple example again. Example of 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, right? So whenever we're going to go through, we're going to go ahead and loop through while our index is less than the length of the number. So we're going to go ahead and have I equal to 0. So our first iteration, whenever we start our first iteration, index is going to start out at 0 and the current value is going to start out at 1, and then count is going to go up to 1. Then we're going to go ahead and inside the first iteration once again, our index will go up to 1, current will equal to 1 again, and count will equal to 2. Then we'll go to index 2, current will now equal to 0, and count is still going to equal to 2. At this point, we're no longer going to be at 1 anymore, so now we need to go ahead and check. So now we'll say, okay, count is in fact greater than max. So go ahead and set max equal to 2. Then we'll go ahead and start the next iteration. So now iteration 1, index is going to equal to 3, current will equal to 1, and count will equal to 1. Then index is going to equal to 4, current will equal to 1 again, and then count will equal to 2. And then finally, we have index equal to 5, and then current is still equal to 1. So then count will equal to 3. Now, once again, we need to go ahead and say, okay, is count greater than max? Yes, it is. So then we'll go ahead and set max equal to 3. And then we'll go ahead and return max. So that's how this one's going to work. Let's go ahead and hop back into LeetCode, and I'll show you guys how we can code this one. Back inside our fresh LeetCode, we once again need our max ones equal to 0. Then we're going to need the current index. So we're going to set that to equal to 0. And then we're going to go ahead and say while our index is less than nums.length, we are going to continue this loop. So we're going to go ahead and make a new local variable called ones. This is the number of ones that we found. And we're going to say while index is less than nums.length. And we're going to say while nums of index is equal to 1. So if you guys remember, we're going to loop through the indexes while everything's equal to 1. And we're going to say ones plus plus. So we're going to add up the count. We're going to say index plus plus as well. And then while it's not equal to 1, we're just going to say if our max ones is less than ones, we're going to go ahead and say max ones is equal to ones, and then index plus plus. And then at the end of our while loop, we need to go ahead and return max ones. Once again, all we're doing is we're looping through our indexes, and because both of these are counting the index plus plus, this is still O of n, is not going to go O of n squared or anything like that. And every time the index is still equal to 1, we're going to count up. And then if we end up going out of bounds, it'll break out of this inner while loop and then go to the end and check to make sure that this is good to go, and then break out at the end. Let's go ahead and submit this to make sure that this is still working as well. And as you can see, this beats 100%. Memory is okay, but I was more worried about the runtime. All of the code and the walkthrough is going to be provided in my GitHub below. If you guys appreciated this, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm also going to be making more of these, hopefully twice a week. Anyway, I appreciate you all for watching. This has been Ethan or Unknown Coder. Peace out and have a great day, everybody.